guys, it's Sophie. So, I managed to miss my September wrap up. I didn't realise until I went through captioning my videos. I just completely blew past it, I didn't even realise, but I didn't have that many books, so I thought today I would show you what I read in September, and like fingers crossed October gets closer to actual October having finished. But I didn't want to miss out on talking about these books, so I thought let's talk about them no matter how late it is. So I'm going to start with non-fiction. The first one I have is The Transgender Issue, An Argument for Justice by Sean Fay. This is a book just talking about all the horrible things that are happening for trans people in the UK at the minute. It's a little bit like even the title, a bite back about sort of news articles and interviews talking about how like trans people are an aberration or a problem, and trans people are asked to go and comment on this problem rather than seeing it as they're just individuals trying to live their lives. I have followed Sean Fay on Twitter for a little while and really like her, so I kind of knew I was going to like this one. I'll tell you what the subjects are about. So she talks about trans life now, so talking about what it's like to be living in the UK, wrong and right bodies, class struggles, sex cells, the state, kissing cousins, the T in LGBT, the ugly sister, trans people and feminine, and conclusion, a transformed future. I really like this one. I was like kind of waiting for this book in some ways, and I definitely think that it is a really good picture of what the experience is like in the UK at the moment, which is terrible, but also looking at how trans people need to be feeding into the conversations around things like feminism, and if we don't, how good is our feminism? So I really enjoyed this one. This one was sent to me as a proof, but I think it is out now. So I'm pretty sure you can get your hands on this one if you're interested. And then the next one I have is Small Bodies of Water by Meninja Powles. I read this one at my mum's whilst I was in my weird like self-isolation away from Tom period. And this is Nina looking at her experience of interacting with different bodies of water across the world. It is like, it's definitely an underlining book, so I've just opened it up to a random page to find this one. That was racist, I say into the air, into the circle. My voice is calm. For a moment my voice isn't present among the others' voices, and then it isn't anymore. If anyone else in the room has heard me, they don't make a sign. The room cannot hold on to my words for too long, or else it might go up in flames. The room cannot hold on to me. And there's also just like these beautiful depictions of her love for water and her connection with water. So in this section called Tofu Heart, she says, I wake before dawn and feel around for my phone next to me. Half asleep, I scroll automatically through updates of lockdown life back home, which looks pretty much the same as always. Hot pink sunsets, home-baked hot cross buns, bright crescent moons above the sea at dusk. I am longing now more than ever to touch the sea, or even just to be within sight of the sea for a moment, for some small reminder it's still there, that I'm still surrounded by water. It's beautifully written. It has this mixture of kind of nature writing and very deep personal writing in kind of like essay form, and also talks about like food a fair amount, which I liked. I thought this was really lovely, and would definitely recommend this one. The next one that I picked up was based on a video I made where I talked about, I think it was care work, and I said that it felt a little bit above the level that I was at in terms of some of the terminology and the kind of social movement around disabled people. And I asked people if there were recommendations for more kind of entry-level texts that people would recommend. And Jen Campbell actually recommended this one, Crippled, Austerity and the Demonisation of Disabled People. So this book looks at the ways in which disabled people are being treated. Again, it is quite UK based, and the kind of myths that have been told, how politics and reforms of funding, reforms of things like universal credit, or like PIP assessments, like how all of those have affected the lives of people in practice. So it looks at disability in context of poverty, work, independence, housing, women and children. It does have a little afterward, they've added a little bit in in respect of COVID. I definitely felt this was a far more introductory text than care work. And it was really interesting to read about it in the UK. Some of these topics are things I kind of understand and know about through work, but not, or through sort of personal experience of knowing people that have been very poorly mental health wise. But not something that I'd read about in that detail, so I found this one really interesting, definitely a good primer, kind of similarly to the transgender issue, like good primer for what it's like in the UK for people at the moment. And then I have Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zorna. Oh, this is a very sad book and a very beautiful book. The author is looking at her mum, her relationship with her mum, the way in which she links her cultural heritage with her mother, and how her mother almost gives her this open door into that part of her own identity. And this book is looking at food, kind of, but how food connects her with her mum when her mum passes away. There is a lot of fairly kind of like graphic, not like gory, but like graphic as in quite detailed and challenging to continue to look at, depictions of what it's like to lose someone from cancer. And I think if that's something you've experienced, that might be a challenge to read about, but this book is so well written and so beautiful and so moving. I had not expected it to be this at all, really. When I first heard about it, I thought it was going to be far more about her understanding of herself, which it is, but I hadn't quite grasped the connection with her mum and how that affected the way she views herself. I just think it's gorgeous. It's very personal and vulnerable, but still has like a really good control over the way in which it's formulated. So I did really like this one, if that one's of interest too. Then the last non-fiction I read was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. And this is one I picked up having read The Vaccine Race in, must have been August, in which it kind of glancingly talked about HeLa cells. Lots of people would have heard of this one. I think this is kind of like becoming a bit of a non-fiction classic, but just to briefly summarise it, Henrietta Lacks was a black woman in a, like, I think it was either like a black segregated or like a low income type hospital setting, and she had a very aggressive cervical cancer, and the people that were treating her took samples from this cancer without her consent to use them for research purposes, and the outcome of the research was that her cells proliferated incredibly quickly and broadly and made for really good research, like reservoir into lots of different things, including vaccines. But this book looks at partly the science, but also partly the personal impact that this sort of medical racism had on her family, and the feelings her family had around what it really meant, understanding what it meant, not being informed. And I really, really did enjoy this one too. I know a lot of people know about this one, I've read this one, so I'm not going to say too much more, but I did really like it. And I just have 3 fiction books. The first one is Dead Relatives by Lucy McKnight Hardy. This is a creepy little short story collection. It is out, oh, it's just come out, it's literally just come out, it came out on the 21st of October. I really enjoyed Water Shall Refuse Them. And I would say I liked some of the stories in here better than others, but overall I really do love creepy stories, and it's nice to find some creepy short stories too. Yeah, so let's see if there's any. Yeah, so like I really liked The Pickling Jar. That's one of the stories in there. I don't want to spoil too much because they are most of them are quite short stories. Dead Relatives was good. Dead Relatives was like the title story and is a longer one. And then I also liked Chicks Don't Have Teeth. So I think there was definitely a few stories that stood out more to me in here than others. And actually the title story I didn't like as much as some of the others. But it is exciting, it's just come out. So if you're interested in like not horror, but like creepy horror, that doesn't really make sense. Maybe like folk horror, or like it's not just necessarily just gore. I think you might like this one. Then I read 2 Sarah Moss books. I am currently reading a Sarah Moss book with the aim of reading all of them, everything she's written by the end of the year. I've fallen into it and accepting it that I like her. I think sometimes, I said this so many times before, but sometimes when there's a lot of hype around a book or an author, I have to step back and give myself my own time to determine if I want to explore it, because sometimes I get so caught up in it. I'm very like hype driven with books, but kind of slowly ate away at some of her backlog and have decided that I do want to read all of them. So I read Cold Earth whilst we were on honeymoon, and this follows a group of scientists, a very odd kind of group of scientists. The majority of them are archaeologists, but there's also this very like odd woman with a nervous disposition, who really shouldn't be there at all, and they all are looking at this particular very old Viking settling ground. I'm not going to say too much about it because it's quite hard, like you kind of have to, but it's like halfway through the book. It says it on the back, so I'm going to say it. Eventually they struggle to communicate with the outside world, and that causes some pressure within the group, but also about the chances of their survival out there in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but these bones. It was very tense. The way she writes is very like immediate and close. It's interesting because the one I'm reading at the minute, which is it Bodies of Light? I think it's called Bodies of Light, is historical, and I'm missing that very strong like contemporary voice that you get in this and in the other one I'm going to speak about. But I did really enjoy Cold Earth too, and as I said, it kind of reading this one and enjoying it still prompted me to go, do you know what, read the back catalogue, read all of it. So that's that one. The final one I read I absolutely adored, and I'm just sorry it's not out yet because I said I was going to love it and I have. It's The Fell by Sarah Moss. This follows a woman who is in the midst of lockdown. She's supposed to be self-isolating, decides to go for a walk across onto like the moors, doesn't tell anyone where she's going, finds herself a cropper, and then what? I just adored this book. I thought that partly the voice, like I kind of spoke about in Cold Earth, that kind of really contemporary voice came through in terms of the narrative, in terms of some of the dialogue, mentioning COVID without that being the main plot point. It was a thing that enabled this scenario to take place, but you could equally well have put a number of other things in place to achieve the same kind of narrative outcome. And I just found myself completely lost in this one. It is fairly short. It's 180 pages, so less than 200 pages, but I think this is going to do so well when it comes out. I know that we've kind of talked about before about whether COVID is something we want to read about that much, and I think for me, I'm totally cool with this, where it's not like it's the disaster that unsettles everything. The plot point is COVID, but where it's built into the world in which we live, I'm so here for that. Yeah, I really love The Fowl, maybe one of my top books of this year. So those are all the books that I read in September. I'm sorry that it's the 23rd of October before I've got the chance to film and talk to you about them. But hopefully you've enjoyed hearing what I've read, and I'll see you guys again soon in my next video, which is either going to be a vlog or a tag, but we'll see. I'll chat to you then. Bye!